Welcome to the Lost Tactician. I'm your guide through the hidden architectures of survival, the forgotten formulas that kept empires afloat against the ravages of time, tide, and terror. For over 1,000 years, historians have gazed upon recovered Viking longships, bewildered by a singular mystery. How did wood survive, not just endure, but thrive across centuries in salt water that should have reduced oak to pulp within decades? Modern ships, treated with chemical sealants, begin their decay in 50 years. Yet the Gokstad ship, recovered from an Oslo mound in 1880 after 1,000 years submerged, had oak planks so intact that conservators could still identify Viking tool marks. This is not luck. This is the product of a civilization that understood something fundamental about wood, water, and time. The answer lies in a revolutionary preservation formula derived not from distant laboratories but from the humble heartwood of the pine tree. Today, we unlock that ancient secret. The secret of Viking immortality. The paradox is immediate. We live in an age of chemistry, of polymers and synthetic sealants engineered by specialists. Yet the wood salvaged from Viking shipwrecks, timber lying in salt water for a millennium, remains more intact than Industrial Revolution ships treated with modern epoxy and urethane. The question burns, how did they do it? What formula protected their hulls from teredo worms, fungal rot, and salt crystallization? The answer lay not in a single ingredient, but in a sophisticated, multi-stage process of extraction, refinement, and application so effective it became the standard for wooden shipbuilding across Europe for the next 5 centuries. The Vikings possessed intimate knowledge of their landscape. They recognized that Scots pine, Pinus sylvestris, contained within its heartwood and roots extraordinary concentrations of natural resins and protective compounds. These were evolutionary armour-terpenes, resinous acids, and volatile oils whose antimicrobial properties would not be formally identified by chemistry for 1,000 years. Dead pine stumps held the densest concentrations of these protective resins, nature's own preservation system. The Vikings understood intuitively that these dark, resin-laden remnants were not waste, but raw material for something far more valuable than the wood itself. Within them lay liquid gold tar, the concentrated essence of the tree's own defense mechanism. The transformation of pine stumps into tar was a carefully controlled destruction. Modern chemists call it destructive distillation or pyrolysis. The Vikings simply called it necessity. Picture a 9th century Norse shipyard. Alongside the main workshop stands a tar pit or kiln, a carefully engineered chamber. Resin-soaked pine stumps are stacked within an oxygen-depleted environment. The fire is lit but deliberately starved of air. A roaring, oxygen-rich fire would incinerate the wood. But a slow, smouldering fire in controlled, low-oxygen conditions produces something miraculous. Tar drains downward into collection vessels, while wood above, charcoal, effies into inert residue. The process requires patience and expertise. Too much oxygen ignites the tar. Too little stalls the process. The Vikings mastered this balance through generations of accumulated experience, using simple earthen pits lined with clay, with channels carved to funnel tar into basins. Protecting a single large Viking longship required 100 to 600 litres of tar, a volume demanding significant pine resources and weeks of continuous kiln operation. This wasn't a secondary industry, it was fundamental to Scandinavia's maritime economy. The richest Viking settlements controlled not just shipyards, but the forests and tar operations that sustained them. The resulting tar was dark, viscous, almost black, with a pungent, resinous aroma indicating freshness and potency. Sometimes primary tar was mixed with birch tar, creating blends calibrated for specific applications. To possess tar was to possess power, but possession alone did not ensure protection. Application was not hasty, it was ritual, meticulous and thorough. The Viking longship employed clinker-built or lap-strake construction, overlapping oak planks, each carefully fitted to its neighbour, creating a flexible hull that could twist with ocean swells without cracking. Yet this ingenuity created a problem tar was designed to solve: the seams. Where planks overlapped, where rivets punched through oak, where timber grain opened to the elements, these were battlefields where wood and water waged ancient war. Vikings met this with caulking, animal hair, primarily sheep's wool, or moss, soaked or mixed directly with sticky tar, creating a pliable, fibrous paste. Pressed into seams, it sealed both flexibly and adhesively, moving with wood as it expanded and contracted. The tar was heated to the right viscosity, warm enough to flow and penetrate, yet not hot enough to burn or evaporate. Shipwrights applied it liberally to the exterior. This wasn't a thin coat, it was generous saturation ensuring deep penetration into oak grain. A single large ship required weeks of application and curing, with multiple coats adding barriers against salt spray, freshwater runoff, and microbial decay. This work could not be rushed. A ship hurriedly tarred was a ship that would fail, and at sea, failure meant death. The tar did not sit on the surface like paint. Instead, it penetrated deep, depositing resinous compounds directly into the oak's cellular matrix. Terpenes and resinous acids acted as natural antimicrobial agents, creating an environment hostile to the fungal spores and bacterial colonies that, usually colonize wet wood. The tar created a hydrophobic barrier, repelling water while still maintaining the wood's flexibility. Wool or moss buffered movement, preventing cracks in the seal. The result was an impenetrable fortress, not crafted from steel, but rather from the marriage of chemistry and craftsmanship. Ships treated in this way survived for centuries in conditions that, honestly, would destroy modern vessels in just a generation. The tar and resin mixture was chemistry derived from natural sources rather than from industrial synthesis. The distinction here is one of sustainability, not effectiveness. The waterproofing mechanism operated on multiple levels. First, tar created a hydrophobic seal, transforming porous, water-absorbent wood into a material that actively repelled water. This was deep saturation. Tar molecules penetrated millimeter by millimeter into wood grain. Where modern sealants sit like paint, Viking tar became part of the wood itself, bonded at the chemical level. Second, natural resins possessed remarkable antiseptic power. Pine tar acts as a natural fungicide and insecticide, hostile to organisms thriving in waterlogged wood. Teredo worms cannot tolerate tar-saturated timber. Fungal spores cannot establish themselves in tar-impregnated hulls. Third, tar flexibility was crucial. A ship constantly flexes with every wave, expanding and contracting with temperature and humidity changes. Rigid sealants crack, creating pathways for water. But tar, reinforced with wool or moss, maintains plasticity to accommodate movements without tearing, stretching and contracting in harmony with the wood beneath. This flexibility was the secret to longevity. A seal surviving not just one crossing, but centuries. This preservation technique extended far beyond the technical. The ability to construct seaworthy vessels surviving decades or centuries fundamentally altered European history. It enabled Viking raids, reshaping medieval Europe, long-distance trading networks connecting Scandinavia to Constantinople and Baghdad, settlement of Iceland, Greenland, and North America 500 years before Columbus. So, European shipbuilders, they continued employing tar and resin-based preservation systems through the entire Age of Sail. Stockholm tar, which was actually derived from the same pine forests the Vikings once exploited, remained the standard naval sealant right into the modern era. And, it was only with the advent of petroleum products and steel hulls that this ancient knowledge finally began to fade away. Modern conservation science has, vindicated what Vikings understood intuitively. Wood treated by their methods proves more resistant to decay than wood preserved using modern synthetic compounds. As we confront the environmental costs of petroleum-based sealants, the wisdom of natural plant-derived preservation is, experiencing a bit of a renaissance among those working with historic timber. The Viking tar and resin dips remind us that, honestly, the most elegant solutions often come from careful observation of nature rather than industrial complexity. A civilization without chemistry laboratories developed preservation techniques outlasting modern products by centuries. Subscribe to The Lost Tactician for more explorations into forgotten technologies and ingenious solutions that shaped human resilience. Like and share this video with others hungry for understanding beyond the surface. And tell us in the comments, what ancient technique holds the most relevance for modern survival and sustainability? Thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the next expedition into history's hidden architectures.